Hello and welcome back to Roots and Resilience podcast with Mandie and Laura. We are back. We are ready to be your companion for the next 40 minutes, 45 minutes, depends on how much I talk, really.
It does. It does.
Hopefully you're doing something grounding and refreshing, maybe a dog walk, and getting ready for your day, and you've chosen to listen to us. How lovely.
What a great choice.
I know.
What a
What more
great
could you
choice.
ask for? So, Laura, how have you been?
I've been okay, Mandy. I think the end of my cold, the end of my fluey sinusitis phase is pretty much over, which is good. I can hear it still a little bit in me, but I think we're pretty much there. Life has been good. Busy parenting, busy with kids' football as per usual, busy with work, just busy with life, but like nice busy, like good busy. It's been good.
I
Been good.
like good busy. Good busy
Mm,
sounds good, doesn't it? I
it
like that.
does.
I
Yeah.
like that. Um, I'm really pleased. I'm really pleased that you're starting to feel a bit better.
Thank you. Thank you. What about you? How are you doing? How's life been?
Yeah, not too bad. A little bit like yourself. Busy but good. Kids are coming on nicely. Things are settling down at home. We're getting into
Hmm.
our new routine, new normal. Yeah, just bumbling along, really. Um,
Excellent.
Still feeling the after effects of some very annoying MP who said that fostering was not a job. I mean, I would love for him to come and take a week's holiday and spend it in my house with my children and then tell me that I don't work as a foster
Sure.
carer. But
Absolutely.
that's just a personal gripe that I've got. And for any foster carers out there, you absolutely are working and you do an incredible job. So don't let some stupid MP tell you otherwise. Come on. Anyway, that's my little rant over. I'm not going to be political
I'm glad
anymore.
you felt that off your chest today. I think there's lots of people will resonate with that as well. So yeah.
Wow. I don't tell him how to do his job. Don't tell me how to do mine, you know?
I'd quite like to tell them how to do their jobs sometimes. But yeah, we won't go there. That's probably another episode.
I think that's a whole different podcast, to be fair. Those people just turned off. Um, so what we are going to do and what we are going to talk about today is neurodivergence versus trauma.
Hmm.
Now, I know you and I have had several conversations about this. And I think it's really relevant for us to talk about it on the pod because neurodivergence and trauma can sometimes be put together as being part of the same issues,
Mm. Hmm. Hmm.
but sometimes they can also be completely segregated away from each other.
Yeah.
Um, I am a foster carer. I have children with trauma, but I think there is also some neurodivergence going on, especially with one of my children.
Mm.
I have friends who are birth parents and their children definitely show signs of being neurodivergent, but
Yeah.
haven't got a diagnosis yet. And I've got other friends who um, they have an autistic son, and he's absolutely lovely, but it's been a very difficult road for them to walk down. And I think it's about really shining a light on that today
Yep.
and having that discussion about what the similarities and the differences could be and how therapeutic parenting can actually support any child, and
Mm.
especially children and families that have that neurospiciness in their home or are looking after traumatized children.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a real key bit here, isn't it? Is about recognizing similarity, recognizing difference, but also recognizing that if we're genuinely using true therapeutic parenting strategies and techniques and have just the whole ethos within the house, we can see shift, we can see change. We're not necessarily going to wave a magic wand and problem solve everything. We know that's not what therapeutic parenting does. And if you have that misconception, let's change that now. Let's use this session and all of our other sessions to change that. But recognizing that is definitely a shift. And I think that's something we can really start to drill down into today.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important. Parenting is hard. Parenting any child is hard.
Yeah.
Um, but when you are parenting a child that does have additional emotional needs, whether that is through trauma or through neurodiversity, any help that you can get, I think needs to be offered to you.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and we know standard parenting doesn't work for every child. We know that. We've experienced that. Um, but if you don't know about therapeutic parenting, if you don't know that actually by just thinking outside the box, by using some of the strategies that we talk about, especially with those amazing questions that we had in our last session,
Mm.
um, you don't know that things could be easier and not quite so challenging for you on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So as I said, I um, live with the trauma of my children, but sometimes that trauma can cover up some signs of underlying neurodiverse issues. And
Mm.
that can be because some of the behaviours are very, very similar at times, aren't they, Laura?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's really interesting that you use the phrase cover up because I've certainly had multiple conversations with foster parents, adoptive parents, and more frequently for myself, residential staff, where they're saying, oh, I'm seeing this behavior and it's because they're ADHD or it's because they're autistic or because they've got some other letters attached to their name that's come from CAMS. And I don't necessarily disagree with the diagnosis, but what I want them to do is break it down a little bit more and let's have a think about, is this truly the diagnosis or is this in relation to the trauma that that they've experienced and maybe living in active trauma at that time. And I think that, I guess, there's this worry that I have, and I see it more and more, and I am getting, or I've developed more confidence in being able to challenge people on this, is just because somebody has said they're ADHD doesn't mean everything they do is related to their ADHD or everything is related to their autism or their PDA or their ODD or whatever else it might be. And so sometimes, whilst we recognise there's very strong similarities between presenting behaviours for trauma or being neurospicy, which I do love that terminology.
Mm.
Um, yeah, there's those similarities, but there are key differences. And I guess the bit that we can start to think about today is, what are those similarities? What are those differences? Um, and do we really have to put them in a box? Do we really have to go, here's our trauma box, let's pop those behaviours in there. And then for the same child, here's our neurospicy box, let's pop those behaviours in there. Does it really matter if we're being therapeutic parents, which box we're putting them into?
I think y- you're so right. Um, it's about seeing the child as a whole, isn't it? Um,
Yeah.
and neurodiversity, especially when you think about autism, it's a scale. The same as attachment is a scale. It's
Mhm.
not a tick box exercise, which is really easy if they do this, 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 and this. If they put all their toys in the same row, if they become very fixated, and if they have to stack their shoes in a certain manner at the end of the day, oh yes, they're autistic. It
Mm.
can be so many different influences, and it can be depending on so many different aspects. I think the underlying message from my point of view really is about, what is it that my child is struggling with? How are they seeing the world? What can I
Mm.
do as a parent to try and make that easier for them? And there are professionals out there that you've mentioned CAMS, which is an incredible service.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
Unfortunately, quite oversubscribed,
Yeah.
huge waiting lists. And when you're living in a situation that is very stressful you don't you don't want to be put on a waiting list.
Mm.
You want some
You don't want to be
support.
told it's 3 years' time.
No, not really. You know, I've heard that ADHD assessments are taking 3 years at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that is just an incredibly long time for a parent and child to be in limbo, not knowing some key strategies or some key ways of moving forward.
Mm.
We're letting people down with this.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, coming back to, I was just thinking particularly about children in care. We'll obviously talk about birth children shortly as well, but children who are in care, again, whether it's fostering, whether they're in an adoptive home now or residential, is actually to hear that. I've been the professional that's delivered that news and gone, yeah, as part of the care plan, I've made the referral, I've spoken to CAMS, I've even been down to the office. The place I worked in, it was a drivable, it was drivable. It was a 10-minute drive down to the CAMS office. And I've had the conversation and I've stood in reception and I've argued my case and I've asked even just for a little bit more leeway in terms of bumping him up the list. And still the wait was phenomenal. And yet being the professional that then has to go, these are the things we want you to work on as the person parenting this child. These are the things we would love to see change for them and to bring them on and to see real growth and development. And yet the thing that is the behavioral thing that's happening every day, the thing you're telling me is the biggest challenge every day, is 3-year wait. It's soul destroying. It's, and I can't imagine what that's like to be on the receiving end of that. But being the professional that's had to go, I'm sorry, but it's 3 years until you even have a conversation about this. I mean, yeah, just like I said, being on the other end of that must be horrendous.
It's soul crushing at times.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and I know it's not your fault that you had to deliver that news. That's the
Sure.
awkward position that you were put in as well. And sometimes it feels as if there may be a little bit of neuro spiciness going on with my looked after children, um, my trauma experienced children. And sometimes it seems like the easy answer is to just label everything as their trauma.
Mm. Let's pop that in that box, shall we?
Um, y-
Oh, we've had a behaviour today. Let's open the trauma box. Let's file it in there for later.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I had a young person that I was looking after, and his behaviours for me were I think this young person has autism. He was so regimented. He was so routine based. Um, it was so fixated, would become really, really obsessed with things to the point where you just could not distract him. Um, and I raised it in a professionals meeting, and I was very much um, metaphorically tapped on the head and told to maybe keep my opinions to myself because
Mm.
he's got trauma, don't you know? And yes, he did have
Gosh,
trauma.
imagine if he had both though.
Exactly. And we will never
Imagine.
know because they
Mm.
refuse to have any kind of assessment done with him. Um, so what I find really frustrating, if I can air a grief, I seem to be quite grumpy today. I'm really not. Um, this whole, oh yes, he's had trauma. I'm not about labeling children. I never ever have
Mm.
been.
Mhm.
But sometimes putting a diagnosis with a child allows that child to access additional help and support in school and education.
Mm.
And when they are older as an adult, they have a better understanding of why they see the world differently. If we just put everything in the trauma box, when a child ages out of social care at 18 or 25, depending on their situation,
Mm.
how can they express that to a possible employer? If one of my children went to apply for a job, and they said any additional needs and he was to put down their ADHD, everybody knows about ADHD.
Sure.
It's such a well-known thing now. If
Yeah.
he was to put down childhood trauma, which he wouldn't, by the way,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's got a whole different set of stigmas and connotations with
Mhm.
it,
Mhm.
but that employer also wouldn't understand how he sees the world.
No, no. And there's a stigma attached to that still, I think, very sadly, in 2026 and, probably still a little bit more into the future about, "Oh, well, you're a child in care. Well, you were obviously a problem. You
Yes.
must have been a nightmare as a teenager. Of course, I'm not gonna want to employ you in my company or my establishment or whatever." Whereas ADHD or autism, okay, so there's a challenge here. We might need to rethink this a little bit. We might need to make some adjustments, some reasonable adjustments. But I'm not going to and of course under the Equality Act and all that jazz, we can't do that anyway. But it doesn't really apply to the trauma, does it? Sadly, sadly.
There's so much more recognition to neurodiversity now.
Hmm.
There's so many
Hmm.
more, um, dare I say, celebrities or famous people that
Yeah,
have
yeah.
expressed that they have ADHD or they have
Mm, mm,
autism, and
mm,
they are a normal functioning member of society. Um,
absolutely.
so
And are doing great things. Like, they're celebrities for a reason. I think you and I both listened to a podcast featuring Lily Allen, who talks very openly about the fact that she's diagnosed with ADHD, and yet nobody looks at someone like Lily Allen, her previous work or her current work, and says, "Well, she shouldn't be making an album. She
yeah,
shouldn't be in a play. She shouldn't be, promoting this product." I think I saw her promoting Chanel or something recently. So nobody's saying she shouldn't do that or not employing her because of that.
absolutely. And another person I listen to quite a lot, who I find really inspirational, is Jordan Stevens, who is
Mm,
also diagnosed with ADHD and is very
yeah,
successful in his field.
yeah.
But listening to him speak, his diagnosis has helped him connect the dots of why he sees the world he does, and why he approaches things the way that he does. And
Mhm,
I find him really inspirational to listen to. Um, so why am I limiting my children's future experiences? Well, the
mhm,
whole thing of helping children who have experienced trauma is to help them put their jigsaw pieces of their life puzzle together.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
why we offer life story work. That's why
mhm,
having later life letters and all of that kind of support around a child helps them to understand their background and their picture of their future
yeah,
as they grow up. But if part of that piece is a neurodivergent assessment that hasn't been done just because they have trauma, that's a big piece of the picture that's
mm.
missing.
Huge, huge, and a big part of their identity. I mean, we know the identities of children, with trauma are blurry. Am I part of this family, a different family? Do I identify as being, like my birth parents or more like my foster or adoptive parents? Do I identify as being from this town or that town? There's so much attached to what their identity actually looks like. And then if someone puts a cloud over the way their brain functions when it comes to being neurodivergent or not, I mean, like, it is a huge, huge piece, and it's something that we potentially not necessarily disregard, but are maybe not putting enough focus on at times. And again, it's not about, as you said earlier, giving that label. It's about what that title, that part of the identity can open up in future or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel that we are doing some children a disservice by shrinking away from the
Mm,
neurodiverse labeling.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
and we should actually be embracing it the
Yeah,
same as we embrace their trauma past. And I think as well for birth parents, like I said, many of my friends have got neurospicy children, no diagnosis, but you can tell that the traits are there. You can tell that they're seeing the world through a different perspective. They just have a
yeah.
slightly different lens as they're viewing everything. Um, those parents need that part where they can be accepted as well, and they need to be shared the same skills that I've been given as a foster carer, um, to help support their children.
Mm, mm. Absolutely, absolutely. I was just thinking about those who yeah, I think about leaning into the diagnosis and how far we lean, because I've also supported therapeutic parents who lean so far into the diagnosis that it kind of takes over. And that, I guess that's what more worrying on the other end of the scale, isn't it? About the fact that, oh, well, we can't do this because my child is autistic, or we can't go here because of the ADHD. Oh, okay, they were, let's use the bunny ears term loosely, naughty in school today, but it's okay. They can't help it because of their autism or their ADHD, or they didn't listen because of the PDA and things like that. And they're almost using it, dare I say it, and let's see if we'll get some complaints from this. Dare I say it, as an excuse at times. I can't go here and do this because my child has this, or I can't. We can't be expected to manage this well because of this. As opposed to going, okay, it's a challenge. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, I'm going to have to shift my expectations and how the day or the event or the thing or even the transition might look like, but does it mean that we completely shy away from it and use it as almost a barrier to the development? I don't know. Have you sort of experienced that in any places, Mandy? Because I've seen it a lot and it frustrates me so much.
Yes. Yes, I have seen it. And yes, I've spoken to parents who, um, I need to take my child to a doctor. She needs medicating because of her
Mm,
ADHD. And you think, oh, well, I hear what you're saying, but is medicating the first option? Is there
mm,
other things we can do before medicating? And again, for my children, I've never medicated any of them, but then I've never had an official diagnosis for any of them.
sure, sure.
I think that, and I might offend some people now, so I'm going to apologise in advance. I think sometimes that excuse mindset, my child couldn't possibly get to school on time because they're autistic, don't you know? Who
Mm,
is that making an excuse for? Is that an
mm,
excuse
absolutely.
for the child? Or is it actually the parent is really struggling with that child right now? They are feeling shame and they are feeling embarrassed because they feel that their parenting is being judged.
Yep.
And so it's easier to make those excuses than it is to actually say, okay, what I'm doing isn't working and I need to think outside of the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
Labels, diagnoses, they can be really supportive in
Mm,
allowing you to tap into those additional supports or the child can get additional support, especially with education. And there is a greater level of understanding. So if you have two parents in a supermarket and they both have children and both of their children are having meltdowns, if one of those parents has got a traumatized child, you kind of judge the parent. If one of those parents has got an autistic child, then you have a lot more sympathy for them. And
sure,
I think
sure.
that is that part of the driving force that we have. If we can make excuses for how our children are behaving, then actually it will make us feel better and everything will be okay
Mm,
then.
mm. It's interesting what you said about how maybe some stuff is more accepted. So I have a friend who has four birth children. She parents pretty much as a single parent, although she's got some pretty lovely support around her. But three of her four children are neurospicy, in very different ways. Like you would almost say they're not even related by the way that they function, these kids. And then her fourth child is just, this beautiful little anomaly, bless her. Um, but this mum, she gets all her kids to school on time every day, picks them all up on time every day. There's activities for all of them. They go to various things. They've got they have a lovely lifestyle despite the challenges that they have. And yet one of her children who got a diagnosis not long into starting secondary school, when she then said, look, because he was really struggling, there was more demerits than merits, there was more detentions than time out of the classroom, and homework wasn't being done and all these kind of things. And he's not a your naughty child, he's not ADHD naughty, he's ADHD disorganized, you know can't put his name on paper because his head is away
Yep.
thinking about probably what he's having for dinner. God love him. This is how he functions. And yet when she was then able to take the diagnosis of the school and say, look, I've been trying to tell you he struggles because of this. Now it's on paper. Now CAMS have determined, the school refused to put in any additional support or any make any reasonable adjustments or whatever, because he wasn't medicated. So because he
Wow.
wasn't being drugged every day, essentially, the school said, well, no, we're not going to do anything different than this. This is he'll just have to follow the rules. And this is supposed to be an SEND specialist school as well, or have a specialist unit. So it's really interesting,
Wow.
the different approaches. And this is not a woman who, I mean, don't get me wrong, she's exhausted, but on the surface, if you met her, would just think she's incredibly organized, incredibly motivated, incredibly determined and driven. And yes, she is. But somebody who could just go, do you know what? I'm not going to give your son a demerit for forgetting a pen today. I'm not going to give him a demerit because his shirt wasn't tucked in,
Yeah.
because the child doesn't get tucking in a shirt. And also, it's too sensory for him.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that I think, there are some people that really lead into neurodivergence, and some people who are supposed to, but are clearly not. And that's worrying. That, as from a professional point of view, but also working with so many therapeutic parents, I find that quite scary and quite worrying.
That, again, the system is just not
Yeah,
working as efficiently as it should do, really.
yeah, yeah.
So, as a professional, obviously, you are far, far more qualified and professional than I am. If you had, um, if you had a parent, if I came to you and I said, "Oh, I think my child has got ADHD,"
Mhm.
um, as a social worker, if you were to put your social worker hat on, what advice or guidance would you ideally want to share with me as a parent of a child
Mm.
who's got a little bit of spiciness?
I think that's a great question. I guess, firstly, for me, it would be figuring out, is this genuinely the diagnosis we're looking for? Is there another cause? And so I'd be having some questions with you, not to accuse, not to blame or to shame, but some um, very almost journal prompting kind of questions to really think about, what is it that we're seeing? Because I think understanding what the behavior is really important. And
Mm,
then once we understand what the behavior is, we know that all behavior is a form of communication. So what is the child trying to communicate? And is it that there is neurospiciness going on in the brain, and so it comes out in this behavior, or is it something else? So I think that would be my first point of call. If we're saying then that there isn't any trauma, or there's very minimal ACEs, let's be honest, we all have something. Let's not pretend that nobody has had any ACEs. That would be very naive of us. But if we're saying that minimal ACEs, minimal trauma, not inactive trauma, we're not looking at that, there is a lot of security, a lot of love, a lot of care, a lot of nurture. Then I think we'd be looking at, what is it that we can do, really stripping back to the basics.
mm,
So really stripping back to basics. And I guess if we think about some of the questions we had, Mandy, in our last session about consistency, about predictability, so that when that brain is doing its neurospiciness as it does, is what can it come back to that it knows is there no matter what.
yeah.
What is it that we do every Monday morning, every Tuesday morning? What does my Monday afternoon look like? What does my Thursday evening look like? What does my weekend look like? And things like that. So really stripping it back to those those therapeutic parenting basics, visual timetables, clear routines, clear predictability, and hopefully then talking about the impact of shame attached to this. Because there is, I guess, a small argument around the fact that being considered, let alone yet even being labelled as having an element of neurodivergence, of having a diagnosis from CAMS, could induce some shame and some trauma attached to that.
Yeah.
So recognizing for parents that, yes, this might be here, but this is not the child's fault, and therefore we need to be, really nurturing and empathic in that way. But I think if we're then thinking about other people to support, it would be obviously looking at CAMS, recognizing the waiting list is phenomenal in most places, as we now know, but looking up other resources online. But also being careful with what content you're consuming, because we know there's some more toxic stuff out there. So make sure it's legit, make sure it's, well founded, well researched, and things like that. Looking for local parent contact groups, so other parents who are experiencing similar stuff. So you've got peer support, I think is really important. You're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. I'm not sure of the statistics for classrooms these days, but the numbers are higher in terms of neurodiversity. And if there isn't a local group or a local resource, maybe you could be the person to start one. Maybe you
Yeah.
could be that trailblazer. And usually the schools are a good place to start because they might be able to advertise stuff for you or have a space for a coffee morning or, you know, do an additional after school club where then parents can come together and chat and talk things through. But yeah, I guess that would kind of be where I'd be at to start with. And I think educate yourself. Knowledge is power in anything like this. Read, learn, absorb. Again, be careful with the content, but just be as educated as you possibly can.
I agree with that completely. Education is key. If we can educate ourselves as parents, then we are in a place where we can make informed decisions and make informed choices on behalf of our children, which hopefully they'll turn out for the best. Um, and if you're in the early stages and you're not quite sure, there's a little something that's not quite as I thought it was going to be going on here, then don't rush into to doing the big labeling thing. Take a step back. I love the idea of doing a journal. Journals, I think,
Mm,
are so impactful because it could be that every Wednesday afternoon your child really, really struggles. But when you then look back at it, on a Wednesday morning, they've got a PE lesson, which is just full of chaos, and they don't actually like PE. I hated PE.
mhm,
Um, it could be something as simple as that. So I'm not ever advocating for anybody to rush out and self-diagnose their children.
mm, mm,
But if you are in that slightly clouded zone where standard parenting isn't working for you, or you're seeing more issues around um, behavior spikes, and you've done your little journal, so you've kept a little bullet point or note of what days they're struggling more on, and I would then do a little bit of therapeutic parenting research, because what is so similar with neurodivergence and trauma is the brain is impacted through these different experiences,
mhm,
and that's what impacts how that child sees the world. So you could have a child who is in a securely attached birth home. A parents are doing everything that they possibly can, but because of some undiagnosed need, there is that same kind of hypervigilant, quick to distress, very easily overwhelmed, disorganized, um, messy kind of behaviors going on that your standard parenting isn't making any impact in.
mm,
But if you were to then cross over and put in some therapeutic parenting processes into your day-to-day life, um, that might be a bit of a game changer for you. That might be
mm.
enough for you to go, actually, I can take a bit of a step back and everything's still okay.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we do as therapeutic parents more in the thinking for ourselves is when we're responding to our children in whatever behavior, in whatever state, whether it's positive, negative, somewhere in between, is we sit there and we think, what does our child need? When they're communicating to me through their behavior, what do they need? And if we can bring it back to that as much as possible each time, we're not going to be too far wrong. We would hope. We would
Yeah.
hope.
And we are our own child's expert, more so for birth parents than for um, kinship carers or special guardians or foster parents, because been with that child from the very, very, very beginning. So you know
Mhm,
their whole history, you know what they've
mhm,
experienced, you know their little personality traits and their quirks. From my point of view, I've had to try and really invest in my children to get those understandings. You know,
mm,
that what is my
mm.
child's favorite color? I need to know that because it's a basic. For you, it will come really simply because
Yeah.
you're a birth parent. For me, it's like a big secret and I need to get through the wall before I can even find the
Mm,
simplest of things out.
mm.
Um, what therapeutic parenting can offer is that non-judgmental approach to parenting. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter if your child has refused to get in the car at the end of the school day. It doesn't matter if you are that parent whose child is having a meltdown in the supermarket. It doesn't matter if your child is the one who screams in the cinema, because we understand, because we're in that team, we're part of that gang.
Mm,
You said a
mm.
couple of episodes ago about being in a gang. Um, and you do have to find your people. You have to find people around you who will go, wow, that sounds really hard.
Yeah.
Um, have you thought of doing this? Or I did this with my child and it worked really, really successfully.
Mm,
Um, and being open minded to it. No one is judging you on how your child behaves.
mhm,
They
mhm.
shouldn't. And if they do, smile and wave and walk off.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They can get in the bin. That's where they belong.
That's right.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think coming back to that bit about, using those therapeutic parenting strategies when we're looking at neurospicy children, is some people who don't get it, that who are maybe a little bit naive, a little bit less open to therapeutic parenting, is they will look at it and think, oh, but it's really permissive. It's allowing children to do this or allowing them to do that, and not recognizing actually quite how rigid some of it can be, and because it has to be. So if there's anybody who's listening that's relatively new and is thinking, oh, but it's going to allow my children to get away with some of the challenging behaviors that they show me because of their autism or their ADHD or whatever else it might be. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. My response to that would be no. And just no, because no is a sentence. No, that is not going to happen. No, 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 no. I don't really have another word for it. But that's not going to happen. That the whole point of it is that there is structure, that your child is held, and that it's not about permission to do whatever you want to do just because you have letters attached to you from a branch of the NHS. It's very much about holding your children and helping them understand themselves a little bit more. And if we come back to our point about identity, how important is it that we all understand ourselves and each other?
I think no is a perfectly suitable sentence, to be fair. I use it quite a lot. Um, moving forward, I think it's about giving yourself permission to not be a behaviorist parent, not
Mm,
to be my house, my rules, what I say goes. If you don't do what I ask you to do, then you're in big trouble, my friend. We're changing that approach. What therapeutic parents do is they still have that my house, my rules, my house is my house, my rules are my rules. They do not waver. But what I do is I allow my child to show me how they're feeling and I interpret that. I put my detective hat on. I
mhm.
sit with them. I show empathy to them. I can see when they're having a hard day. They don't need me to tell them off when they're already having a hard day for something that's happened away from
Yeah,
me. They
yeah.
need me to understand them, to be with them, to let them know that actually they're okay.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. We've covered a lot this episode. We've covered a lot in terms of trauma and neurodivergence. Mandy, what are you taking away from today as we finish this episode?
I am going to take away the fact that professionals who are trying to help you don't always agree with the decisions that are made. No,
Interesting.
I think it's really easy for me as a parent on the front line, dealing with behaviours, dealing with the children, dealing with the judgments, dealing with the phone calls from school, dealing with all of those kind of things, to become really, really focused on how difficult and how challenging it is. And then you, as my social worker, would come in and say, it's a 3-year wait. I would get so cross, and
Mhm.
I would really struggle with hearing that news. But
Mm.
actually hearing your side of it, I can now say it's not actually you that's making that way. It's not actually your fault. It's more of a system breakdown than it
Absolutely.
is an individual person's decision. Thank you
Yeah,
for sharing that with us.
absolutely. No worries. No worries.
What about you?
I
What are you
think my
going to take away?
Yeah, I think my takeaway today is about not boxing things off. And I think it's something I probably talk about quite a lot with the people that I'm coaching is we don't have to put trauma in a box. We don't have to put neurodiversity in a box. They can very much sit alongside. And we were talking earlier, Mandy, pre-pod about kind of almost a Russian doll effect about one being inside another and being their different layers to the children. And it doesn't matter which is the biggest layer and which is the littlest layer in terms of which is trauma and which is neurodiversity. um, that there's very much a blend within our children. So it doesn't matter, you know, which box you try to put a behavior into. You know, the behavior is still the behavior. The need beneath the behavior is still very much there. And for me, using those key therapeutic parenting strategies will always make a difference, even if it is like throwing a stone into the ocean. Eventually, you will have an island, and that's the most important bit. So that's what I'm taking from today.
So important. And I love the Russian doll idea, because what came first? The trauma, the neurodivergence? Does the
Mm.
neurodivergence make things more traumatic for a child? It's just so intermingled. It is so, it's more like a modern art scribbly doodle piece of artwork, really, isn't it? Rather than a box. Um, so yeah, I love the Russian dolls.
Cool.
As always,
Cool.
Laura, it is a joy and a pleasure to spend
Always.
time talking. Um, and hopefully we've aired some issues and some concerns, and maybe said things that people hadn't been expecting us to say. Any comments from anybody, if you want to let us know, either through our Facebook page or Instagram, or on our email, roots resilience at outlook.com. Like, follow, subscribe, get in touch. If there's a topic that you particularly want us to put under the microscope, then please share that with us as well. We are here to help you, guide you, give you information, um, and support you moving forward, really.
Absolutely. And our next session is the R&R exchange. So we'll be answering more questions. So anything to do with trauma and neurodiversity, please email us your questions over or pop them on one of our social pages. Or you can pop it into the comments boxes where you listen, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, wherever. But otherwise, pop us your questions over to rootsresilience@outlook.com, and we will look forward to answering those next time.
I think I've said I think too much today. Um, I
You've
need
done a
to.
lot of thinking.
I know. I've actually got a bit of a headache. I'm going to go and have a little lie down and a fresh brew, um, and get myself ready for the rest of the day.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks ever so much, everybody, and we'll speak to you all soon.
See you soon. Thanks. Bye.